I think the nonsense of sending people to Rwanda is it's shameful.
First of all, let me ask you this. I mean, since the letter that you signed has been published, we've heard from the government, the cabinet minister Grant Shapps has focused on Gary Lineker for reasons we understand. He said he should stick to football. Now, I don't know what he would say to you. He might be more polite, but I wonder, what would you say to that minister, to Grant Shapps?
I tell him to go and take a run and jump at himself. I mean, this party is a disgrace. It has been a disgrace for some time. It was, first of all, ill-led by Johnson, who made a complete idiot of himself, as he always does. And then we don't seem to take responsibility for situations that we have caused. And the Rwanda situation is something that because we didn't exactly contribute to stabilizing the Middle East. In fact, if anything, we unsettled the Middle East. And as a result, we're having to pay the price for people seeing that the British Isles might be the possible way out for them. And it goes back to our own sense of imperialism, if you like, or we don't have it anymore. But then we did have it, and we behaved very imperialistically. So I think the nonsense of sending people to Rwanda is it's shameful, apart from anything else. It's a shameful passing of a buck and a lack of responsibility that we should have. And I just don't think there's any argument for it.
Right. I mean, so your objections to the Rwanda policy have got roots, obviously, in your political beliefs, which you obviously hold quite passionately. Can I ask you this? Is it Rwanda that you object to? Would you object equally strongly to deportations to another country that was not associated with abuses of human rights?
I object to any kind of form of deportation, unless it's with, unless you have a consultation with the people who you want to repatriate in some kind of way. But I think, it's not Rwanda. It's not, I'm not, I don't want to make this, it's not a racist thing. It's it's a lack of actually facing to our responsibilities. What the situation that we've caused where these things, or we've contributed to, we're not the only cause of it, which has allowed this thing to happen. And therefore we have to take responsibility about it and behave like grown-ups instead of behaving like selfish children. Or let them send them over there, put them over there, put them over there. That's not the way to do it. That is not honorable, and it's not proper. And we really do have to face up to our responsibilities. And if Grant Shapps, he's an actor speaking like Gary Lineker as a footballer, well, thank God for footballers and actors who do speak in this way, because more has to be said about this subject.
Yes. Look, I mean, since then you take the view that Britain's obligations in this are related to sort of historical conduct in the Middle East.
Absolutely.
So does that mean, is it then logical to say that you believe that anyone from, let's say, Afghanistan as an example, anyone from Afghanistan, which has a pretty brutal, unpleasant regime, do they have, in your view, an automatic right to settle in Britain if they can get here?
Well, they've got an automatic right to find some kind of freedom. How we find that freedom and where we find that freedom for them is what we have to do. That's our responsibility. If it's settling in Britain, then so be it. Yeah. I just think that, it's such the whole thing about the Middle East has become, it's all you have to read is Pax Britannica, and the wonderful books by James Morris before he became Jan Morris, which is about empire. And actually, funnily enough, it all starts again in the problem of Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan has become more and more extreme, and therefore it's a slightly different problem, because it's people escaping the worst aspects of the Taliban, and they're wanting to have a sense of freedom. So in a way, it's understandable what they are. It's a different case from misplaced Syrians or misplaced Iraqis or what have you from the Middle East, who are trying to find some kind of home, some kind of stability that they haven't got, and certainly haven't got, particularly in Syria at the moment. So it's a mess, and it's a mess that we should not just sort of wash our hands off and say, oh, well, we'll send them to Rwanda, we'll send them to here, we'll send them there. We've got to acknowledge what we have to do. If it means that we have to repatriate them in some kind of way, then let's try and do that. But at the moment, we're screwing it up good and proper. And Sunak's, well, anyway, I think he's history, really. He will be history very soon.
Well, I guess that's another maybe related question. We're going to be talking about that elsewhere on the program. I'm asking you this now, not because I want to attack your views, because I want to explore your views. So, are you not saying, isn't the inescapable logic of what you're saying? If, let's say, Afghanistan, because that's the biggest, largest group of those crossing the channel to this country, if they have a right to come here and to be settled, then that invites a quite enormous number of Afghans who wish to flee their country for a better life to come to this country, which does it not raise really difficult questions in principle for accommodating Afghans in this country, for public tolerance, for one thing, but also public service, social housing, and you know the list, Brian. I mean,
I know the list, but
it.
we did it with Jewish people in the 30s who were trying to escape Nazi Germany. We were happy to do that. And I don't see that's where we've been, that's where our strength has been in our welcoming. We are a small island, but we've got the ability to welcome people. And certainly there's, and I just think that we don't face up to our own responsibility. We don't face up to what we have done in relationship to these people and how we've contributed to their misplacement.
Yes, okay. But just to, again, to stake out the ground on which you are standing, in answer to the question, it would be right in principle, you believe, to have a policy which says an unlimited, theoretically unlimited number of Afghan refugees can come and live in this country. Your answer to that is yes.
Yes, but then, of course, going with that has to be the investigation on who these people are and what their value is, and that goes from the individual to indivial.
What do you mean by value?
I mean their value in terms of, are they criminal? Are they escaping some criminal thing in order to come here? Or are they genuinely refugees from an oppressive administration? Yeah. I mean, it has to be clear exactly who these people are. And you have to make that clear in terms of how you find a way for them to be, sort of given a new life. But we have to know who they are. It's not just a question of being willy-nilly. I mean, it's a proper policy, which we do not seem to have. And it's that responsibility that we need to acknowledge and look to. Yes. Does that make sense?
No, what you're saying makes sense. I mean, you can imagine an awful lot of people would disagree with you, as well as I'm sure many agree with that. But it's a pretty...
There's going to be, but we seem to forget what our own, we kind of wash the hands of what our responsibility was in this whole mess, particularly what's happened in the Middle East and how we've, and it goes back. It doesn't just go back to what happened in the 2000s, but it goes back to even earlier at the beginning of the First World War with Lawrence of Arabia, how the whole thing was broken up, how people were realigned.
Okay, there's another problem of principle. I suggest quite a big one, which is that the traffic in small boats across the channel, it exploits vulnerable people. It sucks money from them. It traffics a lot of vulnerable people into exploitation, some into slavery, and some, including children, into danger. So if I suggest to you that has to be stopped, that has to be deterred by whatever means, and can you disagree with that?
No, not at all. Of course, I would agree with that. Of course, we have to take care and we have to look at who these people are and, and what their situation is. But that's what we don't do. We kind of generalize. We have a generalized attitude to everything rather than looking at something which is clearly very specific, particularly in the case of people fleeing from the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Look, I want to ask you this because you started off by bringing the politics into this, and of course, politics is intricately woven into all of this. You've obviously got no time for the government at the moment, led by Rishi Sunak, the Conservative administration. You are a supporter of Scottish independence, aren't you, Brian? I wonder, the party you have supported is in all sorts of trouble now. The police investigations slumping in the polls. Has that dented your faith in them?
No, my faith is my faith. The only reason I came to Scottish independence was through the failure of the Blair administration in relationship to the Middle East, which I felt was awful what they did. And there seemed to be, for me at that time, there was a lack of social democracy going on. The only place where there was a sort of sense of social democracy was in my home country, which is why me rethink my whole attitude towards, my whole attitude towards the United Kingdom is I don't believe in a United Kingdom. I just don't think it is a united kingdom. It's a very disunited kingdom. I mean, I also, the other part of me is I believe in autonomy for all the nations that are part of the United Kingdom. But I also would believe, my view would be not to have a united kingdom, but to have a united federation of Britain, where each country stands on its own 2 feet, and contributes. Because when you look at these islands, you see where they are. You see that we cannot forget about our neighbours. We can't pretend that we're all part of a whole there. But we have got our individual identities, and it's those individual identities which have been slightly traduced, particularly for the Irish and the Scots.
Okay, I can hear very clearly you hold your political convictions very strongly. I mean, that's very, very clear. I mean, some people, you'll have heard this, I know, before. I don't know how often. I'm guessing more than a few times. Some people saying when you're discussing a thing like migration, when you're discussing things like the state of the economy and attacking this or that position, defending another position, some people will say, Brian Cox, you're a millionaire actor. What do you know about real life? You're asking people much poorer than you to make sacrifice. You know the argument, Brian. You know that argument. How do you address it?
From poverty, so I know exactly what poverty is. You don't have to talk to me about mine. I'm not a millionaire actor. I'm just a jobbing actor who's done quite well over the years because I've been long enough at it. I'm not a millionaire actor by any stretch of the imagination. I come from very poor. I'm not going to go into my background, but my background was not particularly wonderful. I had no father, I had no mother for most of my childhood. And I lived in a state of abject poverty where that was the Damocles sword hanging over my head. So I know what that's like. And I know how we have not served our people. And it's got worse. I've just done a program on how the other half live, how severe the wealth gap is, how we're still in the same state, with how people are subject to these food banks where they feel a lack of dignity because they feel they're begging. This is what I discovered when I went and did this in Dundee. I discovered that people were saying, we don't want to be beggars. We have some dignity. And that's that we forget about. We forget about the human dignity of people. We just don't take it into account that people don't like to beg. They want to feel that they are taking part and they're also contributing at the same time, no matter how meager their means are.